Hello there folks, my name is Spoonks, and earlier this year I posted in my community tab a predictions list of what I thought would be the top 10 highest grossing films of summer 2022, and that list is as follows: Bullet Train, DC League of Super Pets, The Bob's Burgers Movie, Nope, Top Gun Maverick, Minions: The Rise of Gru, Lightyear, Jurassic World Dominion, Thor: Love and Thunder, and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And now that the summer movie season has officially wrapped up, I think it's definitely now the best time to see how well I did in my predictions. So this is how it's going to work. We're going to obviously start with the ones that I got wrong. That's pretty much self-explanatory. The movies I predicted would be in the top 10, but did not make it, unfortunately. Then the disappointments, which are the films that actually did enter the top 10 but failed to meet expectations. The ones I got right, again, self-explanatory. The movies I predicted would enter the top 10 and did. Hooray. The surprises, the films that no one really expected to enter the top 10 but did, or even those that people expected to enter the top 10 but even then still exceeded expectations. And of course, we will end with the actual top 10 highest grossing films of summer 2022. So with those out of the way, let's just jump right into it with the ones I got wrong. And believe it or not, I actually got two films wrong that I thought would enter the top 10 but did not quite reach those lengths. So first, let's discuss the first of them, which is the Bob's Burgers Movie. I thought, given a lot of factors that I thought would help this movie out, it would at least be somewhat of a sleeper hit, given that it was one of the few Fox films that already has a pre-existing fan base, the fact that it was a comedy, and at that time they were doing pretty well for themselves. And in regards to their previous films, this was one of the most well-received films from 20th Century Fox in quite some time, as reviews for this movie and reactions from audiences were a lot more positive than those of Death on the Nile and The King's Man. And given the very cheap budget of $38 million, this kind of seemed like a win, an easy win either way. You didn't really need to make a whole lot to be a success. So what happened here? Why did this movie not chart? And I do believe that is for one factor. The marketing was just terrible. I do remember seeing promotion here and there, but not enough to elevate it or to really boost its buzz and appeal. Outside of a couple of marathons on FXX and maybe a few menu tie-ins at Alamo Drafthouse, Disney did not do a good job of promoting this movie that, by the way, they released on Memorial Day weekend, which is even more perplexing, as that showed that the studio had some confidence in this movie, and to still just barely do any sort of big promotion for it was quite upsetting, as it did really hurt the box office in a way, other than the fact that also it was released the same weekend as another really big movie that, trust me folks, we will discuss that much later in the video. But back to Bob's Burgers. Outside of that, the marketing really didn't do much, as the film opened at number 3 on its opening weekend and only made $34 million worldwide on a budget of $38 million, meaning that not only did this movie not even come close to the top 10, it was quite the box office failure, which, as a fan of the movie and the show, that just hurts me a lot. However, there might be a silver lining here, as in mid-July, the film was released on HBO Max and Hulu, and while official numbers haven't been reported, I have read that the film was actually quite positive and quite successful on both streaming services. It's been topping the charts in terms of most viewed movies there for quite some time, so hopefully that helps the movie out in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, this movie really didn't do any numbers at the box office. The other film that I was even more surprised to see not chart into the top 10 was DC League of Super Pets. This had whole lot more factors that could benefit this movie. First off, the all-star cast, the fact that it has the DC name attached to it, and given the time it was released, it had plenty of room to grow and become a huge success. In fact, it still does, as at the time of this recording, this is really the only animated family film out right now, or in general, just a kids movie out right now until Lyle Lyle Crocodile hits theaters in October. So once again, it had plenty of room to grow. The marketing was also pretty good. I've seen a lot more promotion for this movie than Bob's Burgers, and they did a really good job of getting the word out of this movie. However, it still has of yet to get into the top 10. It has come close, but I'm not so sure if it's going to get there. It seems to be in a battle with a bunch of other films lingering around that area as with it. So what happened? Were reviews bad? Did audiences not like the film? Well, no. In fact, reviews and reactions were a lot better than what many people thought, as people were genuinely surprised by how good the film is. People seem to really like it, and it is holding very well in its subsequent weekends, that's for sure. So what happened here? Well, it did underperform on its opening weekend. Early estimates said that it could open between 35, maybe even 42 million on its opening weekend, and it only made $22 million in its first weekend, which is quite disappointing when you consider the beneficial factors I mentioned prior. How come this movie didn't do as well as people expected it to? Well, I do believe that's a result of two reasons. One, the delay. The film was actually supposed to come out earlier this year on May 20th, 2022, and if I'm going to be honest, I think the movie would have had a pretty much better opening weekend had it come out yet. I mean, sure, it was have to face off against Top Gun and Lightyear, and how The Bad Guys was doing so well at the time, but I think it would have really benefited from there, as May was a much slower movie month for many reasons, until Top Gun Maverick, and after Doctor Strange, it was kind of a dry zone, just movies holding in, and even new movies couldn't really break open new ground like Downton Abbey or Firestarter. So I think this movie probably could have benefited from that, to say the least. And because the film was pushed back 2 months later, it pushed it to a much more crowded month for movies, where I think it kind of got lost in the shuffle, where it had to face off against Nope, Thor Love and Thunder, Minions The Rise of Gru, Paws of Fury, Where the Crawdads Sing. It just felt like another movie that was in a sea of another cluster of movies, which I feel is what hurt it a lot. But I do think another reason is that, well, there really wasn't that much interest in the movie. If I recall, the buzz wasn't nearly as strong as other animated family films like The Bad Guys or Minions or even Lightyear, which we'll get to soon. And it was really interesting. I heard people talking about this movie, and certainly some people were interested in it, but it wasn't nearly as enough as I was expecting to, because again, the star power, the fact that it's a DC animated movie hitting theaters, and the general public wasn't that interested in it, unfortunately. And while things do seem a bit brighter for this film, as it got a major boost from National Cinema Day, and again, it's been holding very well over the past couple weekends, especially domestically, it is still not performing as well as it should be, as it has still yet to reach its doubling point of $180 million against a budget of $90 million. It has only made roughly $160 million at the time of this recording. There could be a chance that it does get to that total, but it has slowed down significantly internationally, and I'm not sure if even the strongholds domestically are going to help it out. So while not a total failure like Bob's Burgers, it did slightly disappoint and could have done a lot better had maybe they stuck with the original release date or just made it look more appealing and interesting to general audiences. Now let's move on to disappointments. And there really only is one huge disappointment that entered the top 10, and that was Lightyear. Wow, what a huge underperformer at the box office, as we will get to these in a moment, but there were just so many positive, beneficial factors that could have really boosted this movie to becoming the movie of the summer, basically, but it had not only a pretty underwhelming opening weekend, but it is the only major flop in the top 10, as the movie costed $200 million to make and has only made $218 million worldwide. And this came to a surprise to everybody, including myself. I predicted this movie to be as high as number 4, and the fact that it did as bad as it did was quite shocking. There were a lot of beneficial factors that could have helped this movie out. The fact that it was Pixar's first film in 2 years to be released in theaters after Onward. The fact that it's pretty much a spin-off of Pixar's most beloved, critically acclaimed franchise, Toy Story. And the fact that it was the first animated family film in months, as prior to this, the only animated movie out at the time was The Bad Guys, and the only family film out at the time also was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And while they were still doing well and very successful at the box office, at this point they were definitely slowing down, so Lightyear could have taken full advantage of that. But no, not only did it underperform, it placed second behind Jurassic World Dominion in its second weekend, which is unbelievable. What happened here? I do believe there are two big reasons to this. First off, once again, this was Pixar's first film back in theaters since Onward. During that time, all of their movies were sent onto Disney Plus for free. Some of them were for completely justifiable, logical reasons. Others weren't. But yeah, Disney pretty much told the general public, if you want to watch a Pixar movie, you just gotta stay home, sign up for Disney Plus, and watch it there. Whereas other studios during that time, like DreamWorks, for example, released 4 animated films in theaters between Onward and Lightyear, which certainly some of them did better than others at the box office, but the point still stands. DreamWorks told the general public, if you want to see our movies, you have to go to the theater, while Disney said, don't worry about it, you can just sit on your couch and enjoy it at home on Disney Plus, which I think that caused a bit of problem here, as it probably stigmatized this idea that families don't really need to go to the theater to go check out a Pixar movie, even a Disney movie. At the very least, if they're animated, they could just watch it at home, which might be convenient for families, but it's not good for these big movies that Pixar and Disney want to release. So I do think this is something that Disney needs to take note of if they want their animated films to be just as successful as their live action counterparts, because if something similar were to happen to their upcoming animated film Strange World, where audiences don't generally rush out to see it in theaters, but it booms in success on Disney Plus, then I believe that could be a problem, but that's a story for another day. Because, folks, when Lightyear hit theaters, it completely tanked. It had terrible word of mouth. It flopped harder than The Good Dinosaur. It was a disaster, but from what I've heard, it did pretty well on Disney Plus, and it's continuing to do so, which again might be one of the results of this whole sending Pixar movies to Disney Plus. I also think that reviews and reactions were also a huge factor, because I think it's something more common we are seeing now, where if Pixar movies don't live up to the huge standard that they do, then families aren't going to churn out to see them. And the reviews, while they were good, but they weren't up to standards with the Pixar greats or even their past 3 films. It played out similarly to The Good Dinosaur and Cars 3, which also kind of underwhelmed at the box office. And like I said, word of mouth was not kind to this movie. It dropped 64% in its second and third weekends, which are not good holds in the slightest, especially for animated family films. So yes, while it did enter the top 10, it did not do nearly as well as what many people expected it to do. Now, we've been mostly negative for this part of the video, so now let's try to warm up and be more positive as we talk about the movies that I did get right and the ones that did chart into the top 10. So first I'm going to talk about Bullet Train. This is going to be shorter because it pretty much met my expectations and used its beneficial factors wisely. It was the last big summer movie. Audiences were interested. The marketing was great. Despite very polarizing reviews, to say the least, it still benefited from strong word of mouth. Audiences seemed to like it, and it was able to become not only Sony's second biggest film of the year, but a decent hit at the box office nonetheless. Bravo. Now, this next couple of movies I am going to clump together, not because they all entered the top 10. I predicted them to enter the top 10 and they were able to do so. Some of them I pretty much nailed right on the money with my predictions, and I cannot be any more happier that that happened. Hooray for me, I guess. I feel that they all in a way shared similar strengths and weaknesses, and those movies are Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Jurassic World Dominion, Nope, and Thor Love and Thunder. Now, these movies were not failures. These are not like Lightyear or Bob's Burgers. They were all massive hits. Hell, 2 of them were pretty close, or even about to, in Jurassic World Dominion's case, to break the $1 billion milestone worldwide. Some of the biggest movies of the year, and they certainly did well against their respective budgets, but a lot of people thought that they could do a little bit better than how they initially did. As something I noticed with all 4 of these movies is that they had solid opening weekends, but at the second weekend, they had pretty steep drop-offs, going from 58% to even 67% in their second weekend. And they've also mostly received B+ cinema scores, meaning that audiences liked them, but were pretty disappointed with them. So I do believe that because they didn't meet audience expectations and word of mouth didn't really help them out, it didn't hinder them either, but still, I think that's one of the biggest reasons these movies just didn't do nearly as well as what was to be expected from them. I feel that maybe if these movies were better and appealed to audiences a bit more, then these movies could have far exceeded the highest of expectations and become some of the even bigger hits than they already are. Because again, these movies are not flops, they're not failures, they're not even really disappointments. They entered the top 10. In fact, I nailed 2 of the predictions, those being Nope and Jurassic World Dominion. I predicted Jurassic World Dominion to enter at number 3 and Nope at number 7, and would you know it, they both landed at number 3 and number 7. I couldn't be more happier. But yeah, even I was still a bit, I won't say shocked, but I think befuddled might be the proper term, by how these movies slightly, and I cannot emphasize that enough, slightly disappointed at the box office. But then again, these movies still did pretty well at the box office. They made well over their budgets. They entered the top 10 highest grossing films of the summer, even the highest grossing movies of the year, and they are hugely successful. Even if they didn't meet their high expectations, I can't see anyone being really upset over how well these movies are done. Again, 2 of them nearly, and maybe even by the time this video comes out, might even cross the $1 billion milestone worldwide. So you can't be too mad about how well these movies did. Now let's move on to the surprises of the summer. First up, The Black Phone. This was a little horror film from the writing-directing duo of the first Doctor Strange and Sinister, and there were a lot of factors that benefited this movie, as it was solid counter-programming, the marketing was great, reviews were strong, and the buzz was strong, and it all really paid off for this movie. I feel like this movie kind of got swept under the rug because on its opening weekend it placed 4th and it didn't really last very long in the top 5, but in actuality it did way better than what many people expected to do. It made more money than the 5th Scream film, which even I wasn't expecting. It was a very solid run for this film with a very cheap budget and just making so much more money than that, making it really doubled it and then some. It is probably going to be one of the most profitable movies of the year. Word of mouth really helped this movie out. And once again, it was solid counter programming. You could either see a bunch of blockbusters or a little horror film that might give you a bit of the creeps and the spooks at the theater, which I think helped this movie out a lot. This was one of the big wins for Universal, and a genuinely honest sleeper hit at the box office. Can't be too mad about that, and shows that horror still has a place in the box office. Audiences still love being creeped out and scared when going to the movies, and this movie further shows that. Not bad. The other big surprise was Elvis. This was kind of a bigger wild card than The Black Phone, because while The Black Phone was R-rated, it was original, it was still a horror film, and once again, horror films still can make decent money at the box office, whereas this, given its intended audience, the length, and the fact that it was basically a musical biopic about Elvis, many people were skeptical on how well this movie did. And boy, did this movie exceed all of those. It had a very solid opening weekend. It placed first, which is anything disappointing. The fact that this musical biopic was able to top the box office on its opening weekend when it was wedged in between Lightyear and Minions: The Rise of Gru was nothing short of amazing, and its legs at the box office was even better. It had very strong legs. Not only did it surpass Lightyear at the box office, but domestically, it is Warner Brothers' second highest grossing film of the year, as it has surpassed, obviously, DC League of Super Pets and even Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. And given the budget of $85 million, it has more than doubled that worldwide. It is a pretty big hit, and once again, a pretty solid sleeper hit. Not a lot of people were expecting this movie to do as well as it did. I surely didn't, but the fact that it was able to do so is quite outstanding. Then there was Minions: The Rise of Gru. Now, family animated films this year have been a bit up and down lately. They could be massively successful, like Sonic the Hedgehog 2, or The Bad Guys, or they could flop, like Lightyear and especially Paws of Fury. And there were a lot of eyes on this movie, especially after it was coming out 2 weeks after Lightyear, and that underperformed, and how Despicable Me 3, while still a huge hit, did not really bring the heat. It made a lot of money. It was the highest grossing animated film of the year, but there was a bit of a decline between that, Minions, and especially Despicable Me 2 domestically. So many people were wondering, this movie's probably going to do well, but is this franchise running out of steam? Well, clearly not. This movie was such a massive hit. It is the biggest animated family film since Frozen 2, as it had a huge opening weekend, a record-breaking opening weekend, as a matter of fact. It has the highest opening weekend for any film released on the 4th of July weekend. Outstanding. And not only is it the 5th highest grossing film of the year domestically, but also the third highest grossing film of the year worldwide. And thanks to its cheap budget of $80 million, this movie more than profited off. If you're going to talk about profitable movies, this is it. There were a lot of factors that helped this movie out. First off, the marketing was outstanding. It's Illumination, so they go all out with their marketing campaigns. The fact that reviews were not only good, but honestly a lot better than both Despicable Me 3 and even the first Minions. And families, and especially children, still have a soft spot for this franchise. Lots of kids, lots of parents, and just general moviegoers resonated with these characters. And even in their technically fifth film, they're still churning out to go see these little yellow guys on the big screen. Shows that how dominant this franchise is and how much this movie these films resonated with people. So yeah, good job, Minions. I guess you're here to stay. We'll see if you can keep this momentum with Despicable Me 4 in 2024, but I think this shows that Despicable Me still has a foot in the box office. And to end things off, let's talk about not only the biggest surprise of the summer, the biggest movie of the summer, but the biggest movie of the year, both domestically and worldwide, Top Gun Maverick. Look, folks, before this movie came out, it was a joke. Let's be real. Due to the multiple delays, Tom Cruise's on-set meltdown for, let's be real, given the circumstances, justifiable reasons, and the fact that it was a sequel that came out at least 25 years too late, it just seemed like this was going to be the make it or break it at the box office, with so many franchises coming back from the dead only to flop. Many people were expecting that this might happen with Top Gun. But then, after they settled on a release date, and after the film started to screen for critics, and more of the marketing campaign started to push, things started to change for Top Gun Maverick. People were getting way more interested and excited to see this movie. Reviews were outstanding, and ticket sales were going through the roof. It just flipped the paradigm so quickly in a way that I honestly haven't seen for a film in quite some time, and it definitely paid off, as not only did it open at number one, it had $100 million opening weekend, completely outstanding, and just kept going throughout the summer. This movie came out in Memorial Day. It is already past Labor Day, and the film is still in the top 5. It is still holding well, and people are still seeing it. Word of mouth has carried this movie tenfold. Reviews were strong. The marketing was great, and overall the film just resonated so much with people that people want to see it again and again and again. It has performed in a way I haven't seen a movie perform in quite some time. I was astonished, and still am astonished, by how big and massive of a success this movie has become. And having seen the movie myself and doing a review for it, I can see why. The film is just that good. It is such a great movie, and the fact that this movie, not any of the Marvel movies, not Jurassic World, not a big, dumb, stupid blockbuster, well, this technically is one of those, but it's I'll say it's a nuanced blockbuster. But yeah, this movie was able to completely fly over everyone's expectations, even those who thought it was going to be as big of a hit as it was. It still exceeded those expectations. Words cannot describe how big of a success this movie is, how impactful this movie was. It is hands down the biggest movie of the summer for a reason. And without further ado, let's end the video off with the actual top 10 summer movies of 2022. So overall, I think I did pretty good. In terms of guessing which movies would land in the top 10, I got 8 out of 10, which, is not bad. I'm not too ashamed of myself. I'm happy that I was able to get over at least 7, at maybe not even 7, at least 5 to say the least. But in terms of predicting where they would land in the correct order, I'm still happy that I got 2. I didn't even think I was going to get one of these films in the right spot, if I'm being honest. Even Doctor Strange, I was like, could that movie disappoint? Well, and while it didn't, it still didn't land at number 1. Maybe that was the universe telling me something. But yeah, overall, it's been a pretty decent summer. Lots of surprises, certainly lots of failures, but overall, the summer movie season quickly picked up the pace, especially over last summer. It was a much bigger, happier, better time for movie going, and it looks to improve even more so next summer. So until then, unfortunately, summer's over, which means we all have to go back to school, but that doesn't mean movies aren't going to stop coming out. So I look forward to seeing all kinds of movies and seeing how well they do at the box office in the fall. So stay tuned for that. And that's gonna do it for the top 10 highest grossing films of summer 2022. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied, unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.